Hello my friends, welcome back. This is the second episode of the League of Fantasy Legends podcast, where we are going to get into the great week of games that we just saw. We had some bangers, we had some snoozers, we had a lot of fantasy points scored. Man, I had a lot of fun watching the games this weekend. I hope you guys were able to catch them. If not, don't worry about it. We're going to catch you up on everything that happened. I don't know about you guys, but I had a very successful fantasy weekend. My DFS matchups, I won 3 out of 4 in tournaments. Well, I didn't win them. I was top 5. I went 4 out of 5 in my head-to-head matchups, and that doesn't even count a very successful Super Bowl betting day. My sleeper teams dominated, highlighted by an absolutely giga-brain Zed pick. I'm Pride Stalker with a pop-off game. I hope you guys caught that game. We're going to talk into it more, but Pride Stalker. Ooh-wee. We got a fun episode ahead of you guys. We're going to talk about the game of the week. We're going to talk about the players of the week. We're going to hit some team-specific notes. We're going to talk the best lineups of the week. We're going to talk some disappointments. We're going to walk you through our player rankings and our power rankings. But first, we're going to start this episode off, like we will every episode, with our question of the day. Alright, today's question of the day, and if you guys have suggestions on what you think our question should be, or what you want to hear from me, head on over to Twitter. It's at LFLpod. That's LFLPOD. Hit us up with a tweet or with a DM, or we will get you credit and we will get your question on the show. Today's question: who, through 4 games, is the fantasy MVP so far? Now, this is a pretty tough question, and I had to think through it. I was watching the JLXP show this morning where they talked about the MVP of the season as a whole, and he and Freak pretty much had a consensus that it was Bwippo and nobody's close. But I don't think the fantasy MVP really falls in line. You know, Bwippo's been good. You can't deny what he's looked like on the Rift, but this is an example of where real life League of Legends and fantasy League of Legends just don't really match up. Bwippo is top 3 for his position, but he's 6 points per game behind first. Really has not lived up to his name so far. I came down to 3 people when doing this. My 3rd place pick right now is FBI. I had Closer 4th, actually. FBI has been really good. He had the one bad game where 100 Thieves, I do not know what happened to them against Immortals. Well, actually, I do, and we'll talk about that later, but I think he's been good. He's been the 2nd best ADC so far. Spoiler alert. I've got him at number 3. Number 2, and we'll talk about this a lot more later as well, but it's Takuye, the mid laner out of FlyQuest, and I hope I said that right. I probably didn't. I am not French. But he has been an absolute stud. His Zoe game on Saturday, 50 points. You don't see that a lot from mid laners. That was just great. He's been really good, better than expected. He went undrafted in my sleeper league, so he's been great. And on the same vein, same team, I think the fantasy MVP through 4 games is Johnson out of FlyQuest. Again, I'm not sure if he was drafted in my sleeper league. He definitely wasn't drafted early, but they've been so good so far. We'll see if that continues. But through 4 games, fantasy MVP, Johnson from FlyQuest. And now moving on to our game of the week. You know, watching the game Saturday, I thought we had an absolute slam dunk game of the week. And then Sunday came and they were taken down. So the runner-up game of the week was C9 versus Team Liquid on Saturday. If you guys didn't get a chance to watch any of the games, I absolutely recommend you go watch that one. It was a back and forth match. C9 had a really different draft than they'd been playing. Of course, in week 1, we had the Enchanters mid with the Ivern and the Soraka. This time they went with a really interesting comp where they put Irelia mid, had the Karthus jungle, and really tried to chip them down with the Karthus and then go all in with the Aatrox top and the Irelia mid. They had a really sweet double TP flank play, which really kind of gave them control of the game. Looked like C9 was going to run away with it, and then they took a Baron just barely overextended. Looked like a little bit of miscommunication. Summit went too far forward, got caught out. Liquid came back and was able to take the game. Really, really fun game. I think C9's going to be fine. Both teams are really good. Han Sama, though, boy, is he good. I really think he's the best ADC in the league, even if the points are not showing it so far. But of course, the game of the week, an absolute fantasy banger, a clown fiesta of the absolute highest proportions, was TSM versus Golden Guardians on Sunday. I hope you guys were able to watch that one too, and you absolutely have to go back and watch it. As someone who stacked hard Golden Guardians in my DFS lineup, like I said in the intro, picked Zed for Pride Stalker in my sleeper league, I was rooting so hard for Golden Guardians, and that game went back and forth. The level 1, where it looked like Pride Stalker was just dead in the water, and then he comes by and gets a double kill, or TSM. I don't know what they're doing sometimes, man. But then, the Jinx is just so strong. Tactical looked really good. And then for it to come down to the fight right at the end, we had some absolute monster scores. We're going to look at the top scoring lineup of the week, but it is very, very rare to have a player in the top scoring lineup who did not win their matchup. And that's what we had this week for TSM. So, absolute banger. Go watch it. Game of the week had me on my toes and jumping around my house. Golden Guardians versus TSM. Alrighty, next up we got Players of the Week. I think this one was actually pretty easy compared to some of the other choices we had to make today. No doubt which team we were looking for. Only one team really knocked it out of the park this week, especially if you consider the expectations for them going in. I have it split between two. Both Golden Guardians players, Lost and Pride Stalker. Lost with 95 points this week, Pride Stalker with 78. They were so good, and I think the takeaway here, and I don't want to take anything away from Lost and Pride Stalker, because, they both played great. I love watching Pride Stalker on his Zed or his Assassin picks, but the fantasy takeaway here is you gotta target TSM and CLG. Neither team is any good. TSM's making some plays, but they just can't get it all together. And both have really had teams just racking up points against them. So, Players of the Week, Lost and Pride Stalker. Takeaway, target TSM, target CLG. Next up in today's episode, we're going to look at the top scoring DFS lineups for both days. I'm going to go through top to bottom, list off the lineups, and then we're going to kind of analyze them and see if we can learn anything from what the top scoring lineups were this week. So for Saturday's lineup in the MVP spot, Han Sama for Team Liquid, I would have gotten you 67.95 points. In the top lane, Kumo from FlyQuest, 35.5. In the jungle, Jose Dioto from FlyQuest, 37.92. In the mid lane, FlyQuest, Takuye, 50.24. And for ADC, Golden Guardians Lost, 45.08. And for support, FlyQuest Afromu, 31.48. The top team was Golden Guardians, would have gotten you 30 points for a grand total of 275.52 points. I hope this lineup looked a lot like your lineup this weekend. I know I went pretty hard on FlyQuest on Saturday. FlyQuest had 4 of the 7 players there, with Golden Guardians having a couple, and then Han Sama on Team Liquid really taking home the win for them and the fantasy win for us in the MVP spot. For Sunday's matchups, the MVP should have been Pride Stalker from Golden Guardians on that Zed we talked about, 75.66 points. In the top lane, Someday from 100 Thieves, 39.24. In the jungle, Spica from the losing TSM team, 47.4. In the mid lane, Abadage from 100 Thieves, 49.34. The bot lane from Golden Guardians, Lost with 50.34, Olay with 32, and Golden Guardians again the top team with 29, for a grand total of 322.98 points. And I hope this looked a lot like your lineups too. I know I went hard on Golden Guardians this week, and I'll tell you right now, my strategy for last week will be the same strategy I go for this upcoming week. It's TSM. It's going against TSM. You look at Saturday's lineups. 4 players from FlyQuest played against TSM. Sunday's lineup, 4 players from Golden Guardians win against TSM. They've got the talent to make the games close, but they don't have the coordination to really close it out. They're good enough to make it long and make it a clown fiesta, but they're not good enough to really challenge for the win. So until something goes differently, man, the strategy is target TSM. I've been having so much fun setting these DFS lineups and watching them play through over the weekend. If you haven't joined the DFS League train yet, I highly recommend it. It's tons of fun, and if you listen to our show, take our recommendations, we're going to take everybody's money doing this. I had a great weekend this week. Like I said, 3 out of 4 of my lineups through the week won pretty big. Turned 5 into 40, turned 4 into 30. If you guys want to hear my recommendations for DFS picks for this upcoming week, tune into the pod. We'll probably release it on Friday. Again, follow us on Twitter. It's at LFLpod. We'll be posting our favorite picks. We're also going to post things you need to know. Are there lineup changes? Are there rumors of picks and bans? Which champions are practicing what? That's all going to be on our Twitter. I also encourage all you guys to join our DraftKings lobby, totally free to play. We'll have the link in the description here. Especially if you've never played before, it's totally free to play. We'll have a little prize for first place. We'll shout out the winner. We'll shout out their lineup here on the pod. Maybe we'll get a prize if we can get enough people in there, get enough engagement. We'll put a little prize on that. It'll be a good way for us to just kind of compete against each other and have a good time. We are going to finish up the show today. First with our player rankings, we're going to look through who are the top 3 players at each position, what we think their outlook will be, and then we're going to look at power rankings. So which teams are best, which teams are worst, and kind of my take on what we're going to see through the rest of the season. All right, so for our player rankings, we're going to start off in the top lane. Number 3 top so far, Bwippo out of Team Liquid, averaging 24 points a game. Second, it's going to be Someday from 100 Thieves, averaging 30 points a game. And the top laner so far, believe it or not, it's Kumo out of FlyQuest, averaging 31 points a game. Now, these are pretty interesting rankings, and I think if you had preseason rankings, I think you'd see Bwippo in the top 3. I think you'd see Someday in the top 3. I don't think Kumo was top 9. He might have been the lowest ranked top laner coming in. And it's interesting. I don't think he's going to stay up here. I think his inflated scores are really, really dependent on those 2 Smite top games. That's something that we probably should talk about, the Smite top, because it's so interesting from a fantasy perspective. It's so good for fantasy, and here's the reason why. CS, while you get points for it, it's just not the same as when your player is roaming around the map and making plays. And so those Janna games, that Janna game and that Karma game, especially that first Janna game where they got a bunch of kills early, just racking up the points. So he ends up the game with 15 assists. He's going to get tons of points. Unfortunately, FlyQuest, for a couple reasons, I don't think it's going to hold up. First of all, they're not playing the Smite top anymore. And so he's going to have to lane against some of these top laners. I'm not sure how that's going to work. I don't think he's bottom tier. I think he's mid tier, but I don't think he will stay number 1. Although he's already got a pretty good gap on everyone except for Someday. I expect Bwippo to keep moving up this list. Liquid's really been playing around him, and he's been looking so good that I expect them to keep doing that. And so that's really what you're looking for in top laners. Number 1, are they going to be able to roam around the map and make plays? And so you get some players, and I think Hooney's an example of this. I'm actually not sure about this year, but just historically, of really playing for himself and kind of isolating himself in the top lane, trying to split push. And so that's interesting. Tryndamere has had pretty good showings so far, but just stylistically seems like the type of champion that isn't going to score well because he's just focusing on split pushing and taking towers. Great for the game, not great for fantasy. One last thing I want to touch on as we look at these rankings for the top laners. I was shocked to see Summit from C9 in the 8th spot. Most of the time these rankings really look a lot like the LCS rankings in general. Like we've talked about, losers don't score points. And so really shocking to see that. We had really high hopes for Summit coming over from, I believe it was the LPL, maybe it was the LCK. A mechanical god, lots of hype. And so far, the team has really not asked a lot of him. I have no lack of confidence that he has the ability to score a lot of points. uh, so mechanically gifted, but the role they have him playing right now is just not a super fantasy relevant role. And so, despite the fact that C9 is winning, Summit's a guy that I'm going to try to keep out of my lineups. Moving on here to the jungle, as we look at the top three. Number 3 here is going to be Pride Stalker out of Golden Guardians. Number 2 is Jose Deodo out of FlyQuest. And number 1 is Closer from 100 Thieves. So these are pretty interesting too, as we see our first Golden Guardians player in the top 3. And as I look across all the rankings, he's the only Golden Guardians player in the top 3. And what that says to me is that when you're looking at Pride Stalker, Golden Guardians is going to play around him. He's so fun to watch. He plays the assassin picks. He's already got 2 Zed picks this year, 1 real pop-off game. And so in games where you think Golden Guardians has a good shot, Pride Stalker's absolutely got to be a target for your lineups. As we look at Jose Deodo and FlyQuest, we've talked about them as a team. They've been so good for fantasy. They've been racking up kills in their wins. Even their loss, they weren't too bad, so it's not surprising to see him here in second. We talked about it with Kumo, and we'll talk about it because FlyQuest is all across these top 3 rankings. Their strength of the schedule has been so weak. They've already played Immortals, CLG, and TSM, who are pretty much unanimously the 3 worst teams in the LCS. So I'll be really interested to see how they hold up. I expect him to kind of drop down the rankings. And then finally, the top jungler so far has been Closer out of 100 Thieves. And his is another situation where it really looks like they're focusing on him being an important, carry player, where they're really going to give him picks and give him a playstyle where he can score a lot of points. And so as I look across the other 100 Thieves players, he's the only one who's atop their rankings. And so Closer, I really think, is a top pick, especially in those season-long leagues, those sleeper leagues. If he's the guy you can trade for, I think he's going to be great. I actually expect him to finish, if not 1, then 2 here in the jungler rankings. Alright, next up the mid lane. So as we look at the top 3 mid laners here, 3rd place is Blue from Dignitas, 2nd place Bjergsen from Team Liquid, and 1st place, surprise surprise, it's Takuye from FlyQuest. So I don't have a lot to say about Blue from Dignitas. Really a team that I'm having some difficulty reading. I'm sure they'll be middle of the pack. But it's nice to see him up here. He's just fractions of a point above Abadage from 100 Thieves, who of course had the pop-off game there on Sunday. So it's nice to see him up here. I think he'll finish middle of the pack. Don't have a ton to say about him though. Second here is Bjergsen from Team Liquid. Bjergsen's actually the only TL player to crack the top 3 of their rankings, and that's kind of surprising, just considering, well, I guess Blippo was 3, wasn't he? So outside of Blippo, but the interesting thing about Bjergsen, he hasn't really had that real pop-off game, but in all their wins, he's just been consistent. They've had him on Corki a lot, and of course the Zillion game, but Bjergsen's going to keep moving up, I think. He'll probably finish first. I don't see Takuye sticking that high like we've talked about already with the other FlyQuest players. But Bjergsen's such a rock, and he's the type of player you'll want in your season-long leagues because he's going to be so consistent, and they're going to win a lot. And so also a good target in your DFS leagues because he's just consistent. He's just that guy. He's your RB1 if you're a fantasy football player. So of course love Bjergsen, and then Takuye had the pop-off Zoe game on Saturday. 4 points clear of second place on average. So has a real good gap, the biggest gap of any role. Between first and second. We'll see how he holds up. He's looked so good coming over from the French league, but remains to be seen, like we've talked about over and over, that strength of the schedule of theirs. One last thing I want to point out here, looking at these mid rankings, that was really shocking to me. Second to last, the 9th place mid laner right now is Jojopion out of Evil Geniuses. He was a guy that I know a lot of people had really high expectations for. I took him pretty high in my sleeper league. Thought Evil Geniuses were going to be really good, and I still think they will be. I still think they're a top 4, top 5 team. But he is 9th. And so they are not asking a lot of him. He hasn't really been performing super well. I think their loss to TL on Sunday where they really just kind of rolled over and got smacked. It was pretty disappointing, and so really surprising to see him that low. I'd be really interested to see if they start playing around him, if he's going to start getting some games where he can carry, or if he's going to stay here at the bottom of these rankings. I'm going to move real quick here through our ADC and support rankings so we can get to our power rankings at the end. Really excited to unveil those. So as we look at ADC, third is Neo from Dignitas, averaging 32 a game. Second is FBI from 100 Thieves, averaging 37 a game. And then Johnson from FlyQuest, of course, is first with 41 a game so far. So I've already talked about some with Dig. Don't have a great read. They've had a pretty easy schedule so far. At least their 2 wins where they've really scored really well. FBI is going to be great. I think he finishes first. I think they're probably the best bot lane in the region, and so I expect him to keep moving up. And then Johnson, MVP of the league so far, well, the fantasy MVP of the league so far by my book, got a real big gap. Almost 9 points a game between him and third place. So we'll see if he can keep it up. He's been great. Can't say anything more about him or the team. I'd be really interested to see how they go. And moving into support, third place, Huhi from 100 Thieves is averaging 21 a game. And second is Biofrost from Dignitas, 22 a game. And then the top support so far, the GOAT support as far as I'm concerned, Afromu out of FlyQuest at 26 a game. I don't have too much to say about these guys. I do think it's really interesting how 100 Thieves is using Huhi. He's been on set a bunch of games, and on Sunday they had him on a farming set with the Fasting Senna, which is a strat I haven't seen in a couple of years, I feel like. I was really interested to see that. If that's a strategy they keep going to, then he's going to shoot up these rankings because he's getting kills, he's getting the farm. He's really going to be a more impactful player that way. And so really interested to see how they keep using Huhi. But yeah, those are the positional rankings so far for the 2022 spring season. All right, we're going to wrap up today's episode with our power rankings. TSM fans, close your eyes, close your ears as we start going here. So my 10th place team, the worst team in the league by my book, CLG. They really haven't looked like they have any life. Contracts has looked really bad. His Lee Sin game, he just kept going in and dying. I'm really not sure what's going on with him. He's been so good in the past. But yeah, CLG has not looked good. My number 9 team is Immortals. I know they got a win this week versus 100 Thieves, who I have really high. It was really a strange game. If you guys watched it, 100 Thieves had a 5k gold lead. They were on Soul Point looking to get the Dragon Soul, and then Huhi went to engage in the mid lane. They lost a team fight 4-0, and the game just ended. I'm not even sure that Immortals had a gold lead after killing the Nexus. That 50 gold wasn't even enough to do it. And so I'm still not high on Immortals. I still think they're a team you can target in your lineups. So I've got them here at number 9. Number 8, I think, is TSM. I've talked a lot about them. I love them as a team to target, get your players against. And the reason is that they're not a pushover. They're really not. They've had a couple tough games. What FlyQuest did to them on Saturday was just dirty. But they've got good individual players. I mean, Spica speaks for itself. Their 2 imports are going to be fine, I feel like. But they're making good plays. It's just that their teamwork has not been there. And so I think TSM's going to get better. I think they're better than Immortals. I think they're better than CLG. And that's why they come in here at number 8. My number 7 team right now is Team Dignitas. I've got them really, I think there's a tier here of 3 teams of FlyQuest, Golden Guardians, and Dignitas who are all really close. I know Dig is 3-1, but their 3 wins are the 3 teams I have below them in the rankings. That's TSM, Immortals, and CLG. And so I've got them here at number 7. Number 6 is Golden Guardians, up a couple spots from last week after having a really good week. I really like Golden Guardians. I really like FlyQuest, who I have at 5. I'll kind of lump them together. I think both of them are good teams, especially FlyQuest has shown just a propensity for team fighting that I think is going to be really useful. But I really like both of these teams from a fantasy perspective. when they face any of the teams below them. So I wouldn't be targeting them if they're up against TL or C9. But if you get them against the bottom tier team, I love targeting Golden Guardians and FlyQuest players. In my fourth spot, I've got Evil Geniuses. They've been kind of up and down coming off of the early season tournament win. I think they're going to be okay. We talked about a little bit about JoJo and how he's been a little disappointing. I think they're going to finish fourth. They've had a pretty tough schedule, taking the loss to 100 Thieves on Sunday. I think they're going to be good. I've got them at fourth. Number 3 is C9. C9, I think, is a really good team. Their playstyle is really different from the rest. Of course, we've seen all kinds of things. We saw the Zillion mid, we saw the Aurelion mid, we've seen the Enchanters mid. Really like C9 from a getting wins perspective, but I hate C9 from a fantasy perspective, and I'm sad about it because I like what LS is doing as coach. I like Berserker. I think he's really good. I've always been a Blabber fan since he took the league by storm as a rookie, but the way they're playing, they're kind of playing for late. They're sitting back. They're not being super proactive. They're playing a good game, but it's not translating to fantasy points. So C9, I have them at 3. But I am not targeting them really with any fantasy in my sleeper leagues, in my DFS things, until they can show that they're really going to score well in their wins. My second place team, and I think my favorite team to root for, is 100 Thieves. Really like their bot lane. I think FBI and Huhi are super good. Their jungler closers also been super good. Top fantasy guy so far, like we talked about. I think that's just going to continue to be that way. Took a tough loss to Immortals, but I don't read too much into it. I've got them at 2. And then my top team so far is Team Liquid. They took the early loss, the week 1 loss to 100 Thieves, but I still think they're the best team. They've got the star power with Bjergsen, and Hans Sama is good. If you watch that game they played against C9. So they're going to be great. They're going to be good. I think they finish at the top. And these are the power rankings I'm going to be using as I'm looking for what my lineups are going to be this weekend. So those are my power rankings. TL, 100 Thieves, C9 is my top 3 teams. Thanks a ton, guys, for listening. I hope you enjoyed just kind of talking through what was an exciting week 2. We're going to keep up with this. We're going to have a good time talking upcoming strategies, putting together lineups, competing against each other. If you guys enjoyed this, follow us on Twitter. It's at LFLpod. Follow us on YouTube, not up and running yet, but I'm sure it'll be a similar handle. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, give us a comment on whatever podcast app you're listening to. That really, really helps us. And so if you enjoyed this, you enjoyed talking about Fantasy League of Legends, we'd really appreciate that. And then last but not least, join us in our DraftKings game. Again, the link's going to be in the description. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. We're going to give you a shout out if you win. We're going to hopefully get prizes in there here pretty soon. And just have fun competing against each other. So if you guys will join that, we'd really appreciate it. And that is all for me. So I hope you guys have a great day. We'll see you later in the week. Pistons wish out.